My name is Kenny Schachter, and I've been in the art world in various capacities for over 3 decades. I would categorize myself as an artist, a writer, and a lecturer, and a curator. I came into the art world in a very unorthodox, kind of random way, but one should never be fixed in one's expectations or goals in life, that it's a kind of shifting landscape. When people say, what do? I do so many different things. Mainly, I do one thing. I don't differentiate between lecturing, writing, curating, selling art. I mean, for me, the key to life is to find your passion. I love art. Art gave meaning to my life, that and my children. Were it not for art, I wouldn't be here talking to you, because I've suffered various tragedies in my life. Like, I lost one of my children about 5 years ago. And if it wasn't for art, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would be in the gutter. And art really helped. It imbues my life with meaning. And for me, art is a way of communication, a way of self-expression. I can't even say it's like a religion, because it far exceeds what my notion of what religion is or could be. I defined myself in the negative for a decade, practically. I had a very unusual, not a terribly thrilling or happy childhood, but a lot of people have suffered a lot of worse. My dad was in the carpet business. He sold carpet. And my mom was a housewife. I have one recollection of my mom, like, painting a mural on the wall in the basement. That's the only time I ever saw her do anything remotely art-related. I was never encouraged, even by her, and she was much more benevolent than my dad. I just wasn't encouraged to do anything as a child in any way. We never did things together as a family. But I lost my mom when I was very young, and my father was terribly unsupportive, and that's putting it mildly. So I stuttered until I was around 14, 15. I was always kind of alone, alienated, overweight kid in my room, cutting and pasting images on my wall that was comprised of cork, which is like a very 70s aesthetic in the suburbs of New York, where I was born in Long Island. I was born in Queens and lived in Long Island. And that was really what I did. That's all I did. It was a very subconscious act. It wasn't in any way, I mean, if you would have mentioned the word art, I wouldn't even know what art was. So it certainly wasn't that. It was just a form of reorganizing imagery that I was drawn to. So it's a way of discerning, wading through the morass of information and visual stimuli and reconfiguring it to my own intent and purposes. And that could pretty much define what I do today. I was just filling time, but I was curating, which is also a pretentious term. I was basically just editing imagery. So it was a mixture of, I think somebody gave me as a gift National Geographic magazine. I was probably mainly looking at the boobs of various tribes in Africa, I will admit. And then it was like car magazines. So what drew me to cars without even being aware was strictly the industrial design. I don't care about sports. I don't care about racing. At that point, magazines were periodicals, journalism, newspapers and magazines had a much different significance or prominence than they do today. That was before the internet. When I was young and hamburgers were 5 cents, that was the primary way information was consumed. That was the only way, through the news on television and through newspapers and magazines. Unlike many kids you'll hear about, like Jean-Michel Basquiat, his mom took him to museums when he was young. I never went to a museum ever until I was in university. Beyond that, I didn't know art galleries existed until I was nearly 27. My dad did the same thing every single day of his life in a very kind of routine fashion. So one thing I was certain of, I didn't want to be stuck in a routine. I didn't want to do a job for the sake of having a job. I don't know how this was instilled in my mind, but I wanted to find something I love to do to spend the rest of my life. I had no interest other than putting things on my cork wall, bulletin board type wall in the suburbs of New York. I never even had a conversation like I'm happy with myself right now. I never had a conversation till until my mother died when I was 13. I was almost catatonic before that, but like the way that I'm just talking to you now, I never experienced that until later in life. I went to university and I stumbled into the first kind of epiphany I had in coming into who I am today, although it's constantly shifting all the time, was when I was in college. I took a basic philosophy class, and that was the first substantial seismic shift in my life. And for me, school was just bad news. So in college, I guess in between procrastinating from exams and smoking a bit of marijuana, which I was wont to do, I went to the East Wing of the National Gallery in DC, and I just went, and then I went back. Not specifically having any particular take, likes or dislikes. It was just, I just went, and it was a revelation. It didn't register. It didn't really stay with my thinking at the time at all. Definitely subconsciously, something was triggered. I remember the works of various modern masters, which was showcased in this contemporary art museum: Cy Twombly, Robert Rauschenberg, Warhol, Basquiat, just to kind of, I name a bunch of male artists, and things have radically changed, thankfully, in the last 10 years, but that was always something I was cognizant of and made an effort to deal with in my curatorial work. Anyway, I went to museums, went to college, graduated college, did really well in philosophy, and didn't know what to do. I had no other interest at that time besides philosophy, and there was no job for philosophy, or it sounds too pretentious to say philosopher. I hardly think I'm anything of the sort, but you could either be like a high school teacher, or if you had a PhD, you could be a professor. And I wasn't prepared at that time. Teaching didn't register with me. Anyway, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I didn't want to get a crap job in an advertising agency and get stuck in some rut with some stupid undergraduate degree. I applied to law school. My academics were great in philosophy, but terrible in everything else. And I had less than no interest in the pursuit of the profession of law. That's putting it mildly. But I made the commitment to go to law school. I got it subsidized, and I wasn't not going to fulfill the obligation that I undertook. It was a contract. I would go to law school, it would be subsidized, and I would finish, and I would do my best, not my best, but I would pass. So when I took the LSAT, which is the preparatory exam to get into law school, I did miserably, which was no surprise. And I got into a law school, and it was worse than I even would have imagined. Mainly, it was people raising their hands to hear themselves speak without even responding to a given question. And I was making drawings of like clothing. I thought maybe I could do something. I knew I wanted to do something creative. I didn't have any inkling what that could be other than perhaps fashion. You wouldn't know it by looking at me today. And went to law school, and then after 3/4 of the first year, I had enough. So I basically began working. I told my family and my employers that I was in night school. There was no night school. I worked, and then anytime a class required attendance, I would drop and switch. So I began working on the floor of the stock exchange, of the American Stock Exchange. I thought maybe I could do something finance-oriented. To this day, I use my fingers to add and subtract, so that wasn't going to work. That was a debacle, to say the least. Then I took part-time jobs writing for various law firms, and that is where I honed my writing skill during law school and after, when I actually managed to pass the bar. I took a part-time job with a law firm as a writer and did some minor litigation, kind of performative. That was more akin to acting than anything else. Picking juries is quite fun. I argued a few motions. Anyway, I just worked all throughout law school, managed to pass the bar, immediately handed out a resume under 100 doors in the garment district to get a fashion job. And I did. And just by chance, it was selling ties from 2 gigantic suitcases, renting these mid-sized cars because these giant suitcases wouldn't fit in anything but traveling the East Coast selling these fucking ties and spreading them out on tables to mom and pop shops. And to say that was like, I was like Willy Loman, this kind of disillusioned, existentially annoyed salesperson with a terrible sense of direction. So every time I would go from one shop to the other, I would get lost. Then you'd have to, it would entail having like a meeting, either if it was a small department store, it would be this kind of meeting with a group of people to decide to spend $1,000 on a few dozen ties. It was really soul-sucking and it was miserable. And I'm allergic to silk, and ties are silk, just to add a little more cartoonish aspect to the story. Anyway, that was terrible. And I found out, when you take the bar exam for legal practice, you don't find out until 3 months after I passed the bar somehow. I quit the fashion company and I took a part-time job as a lawyer. In between, a friend said, would you like to go to Sotheby's? There's an estate sale of Andy Warhol in 1988. I was 26 years old. I had no particular interest in Warhol. I've really grown to appreciate the work. At that time, there was a lot of press about his cookie jar collection and his jewelry and his watches. I thought it'd be fun to go kill some time in between job search and see some cookie jars. And unbeknownst to me, it was his collection of contemporary giants that he had mostly traded with or collected during the course of his life. He was a hoarder in the extreme. There was Basquiat, a beautiful David Hockney portrait of Andy that was on the cover of this beautiful catalog, and lots of Basquiats and extraordinary things. And at the same time, Sotheby's was preparing for a seasonal auction of contemporary art, and I was flabbergasted. I called myself idiot savant. I thought that an artist made a work of art and it went to the Smithsonian. It went to a museum. I had no notion whatsoever that art could be bought and sold for a domestic setting, context. And that really threw me. It was like, yeah, that is when my life absolutely had a pivotal shift. And I became aware that there was something called the art world, the art market, and that whole unknown universe. And it's been a learning experience literally in all the time since that period. So at that point, I remember seeing an ad in the New York Times for a gallery exhibition at a gallery called Herschel and Adler Modern in 1988. I was, like I said, 26 years old, maybe 27 at that point, shortly after Warhol's estate sale. And it was for an exhibition of 3 German artists, actually 1 American artist, Cy Twombly, Sigmar Polka, and Joseph Beuys. And they were prints and multiples. Yeah, I went to the gallery, saw some art, and I was like, I have to have it, and I need it, like now. I coveted it. I coveted a print by Cy Twombly. It was about $5,000, and it had hand-colored marks in crayon. I was missing one key ingredient to owning this artwork, and that was $5,000. So I rocked up at Chase Manhattan Bank, probably dressed even worse than I am now, and I asked for an unsecured loan for $5,000. And when I was queried as to what for, there was no collateral as an unsecured loan. I said to buy some art, and they looked at me with like dismay and bordering on horror. It all but threw me out of the bank. And after turning their head sideways like a dog that doesn't understand communication, I went back to the law firm and I said, can you please call the bank and tell them I'm making enough money to warrant getting this loan? And I got my loan. And I immediately started this journey. I mean, I'll say professional, but I'm rather unprofessional in my pursuit of it. But I immediately began to immerse myself. I became an immediate art-entrenched human being. So, well, first I had to educate myself. For me, law school taught me some very extraordinary elements that I've taken with me throughout my entire career. And that's the discipline of focus, of work, even sometimes when it's unpleasant, and it's a means to an end. I have no end other than the pursuit of finding a life in art, and I will stop at nothing to do that, to attain that. So I began, like, I would say, to begin my professional course in art, out of economic necessity, I needed to make money doing what I loved. I immediately started making art from the beginning, but there was no ready market for it. There still barely is. I thought, like, what could I possibly bring to the table in the art world? What can I do? I want to make art. I've been making art and literally sticking it under my bed with bits and pieces from the hardware store. Still collaging, branching into sculpture, but very amateur. I'm still an amateur. So I started to go to, I thought there were art dealers. There was an art dealer called Colin DeLand. He died of cancer, probably in around 2000 or the early 2000s. He had a gallery called American Fine Art. He made art under a pseudonym with a very famous contemporary artist called Richard Prince under the assumed name John Dog. And he also had a gallery, Colin, and he was just fabulous impresario. He was an artist cloaked in the clothes of a dealer, but you could tell he wasn't conventional in any sense of the word, and that was really someone I wanted to emulate. But I felt like he's been doing this for a decade or two. What could I possibly bring to the table? So I thought, first of all, I need to lay some foundation. I need to learn the fundamentals. So the thought of going back to school after my dreaded law school trauma, I started, after studying German, being particularly drawn to German philosophy, I started to go to Germany. And at that time, in the late 80s, early 90s, Germany had the most advanced, largest art market other than New York City, which changed dramatically after a series of economic downturns, both here and in Germany. Anyway, I started to go to Germany and just travel to multiple cities, going to museums, galleries, and meeting as many artists as I possibly could in order to teach myself. At that point, two things happened that were quite formidable in my life, in the formation of my career. One was that I started buying art, and I met a gallerist, and she offered me the opportunity to organize an exhibition of German art. And the other thing was, I knew I had to learn. I could teach anyone off the street in 6 months or less contemporary art history. Most people in my profession don't read as much as they should or know as much as they should, especially new crops of art collectors that collect mostly with the organ of their ear rather than their eye or their brain. It's about fashion as much as anything else. So I knew I had to learn the basics. I was not going to take Art 101 and pick up a history book and study art history. So I thought I could teach. Well, that would be a good way to force feed myself the information that I need to learn. So I went to the New School for Social Research in 1992, wormed my way. Like when I was in fashion, I would have to make appointments with these shops to sell them the ties they didn't want. So I did the same thing at the New School. I went to the New School, wormed my way into an appointment with one of the deans, got a meeting, and I said, I would like to teach a class on conceptual art history. Barely even knew what conceptual art was. He said, okay, what's your background? I said, what's your graduate school background? I was like, I never went to art school. He's like, but you can't have a teaching job unless you've been to school. I'm like, well, I have a JD, a Juris Doctor from law school, and I've curated 6 shows, one of which was reviewed by Roberta Smith, like one of the most profound writers of the century for art, whose husband is a famous art critic, Jerry Salt. The famous composer John Sibelius in 1937 was asked, do you read reviews of your compositions? And he said, no. No statute has ever been erected for a critic. So I've now since made a statute of, for me, the most wonderful and extraordinarily brilliant critic in my lifetime, and that's Roberta Smith, to disprove him. Anyway, I got the job on probation to teach 6 lectures. I bought Jansen's Book of Art History, and I would read 3 chapters, drink a big beer before class. Remember, I'm someone who stuttered and never had a conversation with anyone. And I was teaching in it was a program in the new school where it was for credit, but also for professionals outside of full-time students. So there was a heart surgeon in the class that was an art collector, and then kids for credit. And it was like this Japanese method of accounting where the Japanese will build cars by buying the parts enough to fulfill the orders of the cars they've sold. And I would read the amount of chapters necessitated to teach that class, drink a 40-ounce Bud, and get on with it. The dean who hired me on probation left the new school, and I was on the books as an adjunct professor. At the same time, using the skills I learned as a lawyer, I began to write about all of these experiences that I was having concurrently in my art trips and my art experiences. And to this day, that was a way to give a greater depth of meaning and to force me to concentrate on the day-to-day goings-on of my art life, because I had to spin it into a story, into an arc of a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if I had to go to an art fair to buy art, sell art, or just do my little hustle, if I have to tell a story about it, I have to pay a hell of a lot more close attention. And that's continuing, that's what I do today. But like, I'm very non-hierarchical about my love and appreciation of art, and very democratic. I love to help people. I love to teach. I love to inspire people. I don't differentiate between this Zaha table sitting beside me, a car designed with care and fastidious detail. I don't differentiate between a car, a fork, a spoon, or a sculpture. Anything good is good. And I hate, the art world is all about pigeonholing people, compartmentalizing people, and I've railed against that and the great degree of hypocrisy that pervades the art world from day one. I did a book where I interviewed 100 random people from Harlem to Wall Street, and I asked them their views about art, if art had any meaning to them in their lives and any impact on a day-to-day basis. Because I feel this country is really out of touch. Art is not encouraged in school. It's not even taught the way it is in other schools. And surprisingly, most people responded in that capacity favorably, that the way you walk could be art. What you do as a hairdresser or in any profession, if done with care and passion, could be an art form. And that really resonated with me. People say, oh, the art was better a decade ago. Oh, art was better a century ago, or more or less. It's ridiculous. Art is not a matter of measuring. It's not a competition. It's a contact sport, unfortunately, when you're in it. But art is a reflection of humanity at a given time. It can't get better, worse, or different. It is. It exists. That's what differentiates humans as a species, is that we make art. If there were more artists in the world, if people were more considerate and compassionate in the most basic fundamental sense, life would be a lot more pleasant for everybody, a lot safer, a lot more human. So people complain artificial intelligence is going to be the death of us. It's going to annihilate civilization. Well, guess what? We're doing a damn good job on our own of doing that. And artificial intelligence is a misnomer because it's all created by people. It's inputted with data from humans. The machines are created by people. and you can never divorce the human component of technology. Yes, these machines learn how to replicate the process of taking inputted data and reconstituting it. But I certainly don't ascribe to the notion that this technology will go rogue and destroy us. We're going to destroy ourselves, sadly and unfortunately, well before that point happens with technology. Though I am in bed with technology and spend way too many hours of screen time a day, which I have no regrets about because that's how we communicate today. And that's one of the big revolutions in the art world over the last 100, 200 years is the internet, social media, and the blockchain. So whereas in the past, the only way to convey an image between two human beings was through television, film, newspapers, and magazines, and that was it. So when I started my career, if I was pitching an exhibition to curate or trying to communicate my artworks from one person to the other, I would have to reduce them to a photographic slide because we never had money as artists. We would use the smallest, cheapest format of photographic reproduction, and that was a slide, which was like less than an inch square, and it would go into a sheet of 20 slides, and you would send that in something called an envelope with a return address and a stamp. And that was the only way that one person could communicate an image to another person. And I remember somebody writing me a heartfelt letter of multiple pages about how to get a foothold into the art world. And I wrote him back, like, move to New York. And I didn't mean to be an asshole more than I am, but there was no other option. If you want to be in the art world, you have to be in the art world, which is near the center. The center has only ever been back then in New York or London or Cologne. Now it's expanded dramatically to China, Africa, all over Asia, South America, all over the world. That was absolutely facilitated and enhanced through the digital means of communication. Right now, I'm up to my ears in art, in the art world. I've been doing this for 3.5 decades. I have a museum show. I've written for MIT. I've taught at Harvard and Yale. I teach at the University of Zurich on faculty, and I'm on the advisory board. But I will always have the mindset, the mentality of an outsider. I don't take anything for granted. I don't make any a priori, any preconceived notions of what's right, what's wrong. The art world knows one word, and that's the word no. No, you can't do this. No, you can't say that. Behave like this. And I do the opposite, just by nature, contrarian, anarchistic nature that pervades everything I do, how I think, and who I am. Art, in essence, has this wonderful aspect of not just depicting or relating to, but like capturing the essence of being a child. There's something so wonderfully childlike. Sitting in a sand pit and making drawings with your hands. Freud would say playing with your poop or something is where it originated from. But again, it was just this, like, I particularly relate in life to animals and children because of the freshness in the way they think and their approach to everything. And I really want never to lose that aspect of my personality. I once heard an art professional say, it's good that art sells for a lot of money because when art sells for a lot of money, people have a tendency to buy it and protect it. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The art that needs to be preserved and protected is the art where there's not a consensus about the quality of it. A lot of the art that I know and love, another artist was called Vito Acconci. He died destitute like Paul Tech did. And his art is so seminal to so many younger artists, so impactful on the lives of so many talented and creative people. And yet the work was never market affirmed. Art needs protecting like small children and animals. It needs to be cared for, and that's a lifelong obligation. I recently gave hard thought to what I would grab in my house if it was ablaze, and I came up with this sculpture by Paul Tech of 23 bronze mice. And I have a friendship with the artist Tracy Emin, and we've corresponded with each other over the last 3 or 4 years. I literally moved the correspondence closer to where the logical exit strategy would be. I mean, I think nobody could own art. When you collect art, you're charged with the responsibility to make sure it doesn't get destroyed. You can't take your stuff with you, although it would be nice to be in a coffin decorated with some art or stuck in a coffee table with formaldehyde. I'm always buying art, a little bit uncontrollably still. It's one of my last vices. I'm really trying to, at this stage in my life, address some of the problems I've had. I'm like living within the pages of an unwritten history book. So art to me tells a story of the time. When I purchased my first piece of art, I can't remember how long I lived with it for. I have art that I've been coexisting with for 30 years plus. Art is by nature a very materialistic pursuit. There are things. You're making things, you're buying things, you're selling things, you're inundated with things. Those are material by nature. It's at the same time, I'm attached to the notion of art in its ideational form. That sounds really pretentious, but I like the idea that art conveys to me. I have an incredibly, my relationship with art is very special to me. The art for me is inspiring, and art for me has some root of a philosophical import. Every single day of my life that I am around my art, whether it's my own personal art or the art of other people, I touch it, I move it, I interact with it. In the same way you read a book and you have to physically turn the pages if you're not on a Kindle. I always used to think when I was curating shows, more so than making work, I used to think that like artists are not curing cancer. They're not doctors. They're not researchers. They're not scientists. Why do artists behave as if they're holier than thou and more religious than religious figures? They take themselves so seriously. And for me, well, they now have clinical studies from Harvard all over the world that living with art reduces anxiety, blood pressure, and helps. I work with a hospital in the UK, and they're accredited as a museum, and they commission artworks in all the public spaces. And art has been proven, like having a golden retriever, to prolong life and to make life more livable, more palatable, a healthier lifestyle. I've always been someone who culls information, pre-existing information, and rejigs it, reconfigures it to my own personal interest and aims. So in the same way, when I was studying philosophy, I would have a book by Immanuel Kant or Hegel or even Sartre's Being and Nothingness, and I'd have this imposing text in front of me, and I would have to read from it and glean what was the essence, what was the kernel, what was the importance to be derived. Whether you're reading a text and reading comprehension and finding what's important to you, that approach of tackling a text for a given end or coming up with my own theory for a class or an exam or a philosophical paper, thesis, I apply the same apparatus or structure to how I look at images for inspiration, images to learn from, images to shape my mindset, images to shape my outlook about the world where we are today. I use digital technology to cut and paste the way that I think and feel about various social, political, economic, art world, and technological issues, which for me constitute art. So rather than creating the wheel every time from scratch, a large part of what I do is to take pre-existing imagery and reconfigure it to my own ends. So in that sense, absolutely nothing has changed. Like there's a famous, Picasso or Kurt Schwitters is a German artist who made these these extraordinary collages. These are some of the first instances from artists depicting representation, perspective in the Renaissance, and from photographic reproduction, ways of painting and sculpting, to pure abstraction, dealing with formal issues of color and form, to appropriation from Braque and Picasso, putting newspapers into images, and Hannah Hock, another German artist. Collage is a way of thinking and a way of approaching art and information. And that to me is very important. Today you have Photoshop, AI, ChatGPT, and various new means to approach an age-old issue of making new things from old. I would love to be able to make an artwork that's just beautiful. I think beauty, I just don't do beauty. There are some things I've made that are less unattractive than other things. I mean, I make narrative short video works that are satirical. For me, beauty is overrated when it comes to art, and I find beauty in lots of things that other people are absolutely find repulsive. And there's a sculpture I made from a photograph of my torso in the most conventional fashion that's time-worn and been around for thousands of years, since the Venus of Willendorf. Some of my favorite artists, there was an American artist, Paul Thek, Thek. He died in 1988 of AIDS, which is a tragedy in and of itself. The art world of AIDS decimated such a chunk of the international population, particularly focused on creative communities and various other countries. And it was, it's awful. But Paul Thek suffered because his art was too good. Paul Thek made this fake meat sculpture out of wax and pigment, bits and pieces, sometimes put it into vitrines that resembled minimalistic art of the time. One time he put a big chunk of raw meat into it, which was handcrafted painstakingly, into an Andy Warhol Brillo box sculpture, which Warhol gave him. And in a way, it was this beautiful depiction of this human fragility and frailty. How when you're young and you're running around drinking and doing drugs and you think you're invincible, at the same time, if you cut a human being open from any walk of life, we're all the same. We're very fragile. Life, there's a thin line that separates between life and death, beauty and hideousness. Sometimes being too far ahead of the time is worse than being behind the time, because art largely functions, the art market and the quality or the merit of art can oftentimes be two parallel lines. So to think that a successful artist is a rich artist is absolutely misconception. It's just wrong. Again, people think a successful artist is someone with a private plane going to St. Bart's and living a life of great luxury and wealth. Some of the artists that were most significant to me in formulating my way of thinking and making, some of the artists I've loved the most have fared the worst. If you go to auctions or you go to art fairs, you'll see the same art again and again and again at multiple venues, multiple galleries, multiple fairs, multiple biennales and international traveling exhibitions of contemporary art. People want what has been proven to succeed in the past, in the recent past. A lot of times, like I said, the art world in particular, very like fashion, very much operates on the basis of a herd mentality, of a sheep mentality, where people, if an artist has success, affirms success. Where you'll have an artist, like let's say Damien Hirst, not to pick on him, but he is this kind of like lightning rod of some of the worst aspects of where art is turned. He's brilliant, for sure, but at the same time, he sort of capitulated to just kowtowing to giving people more of the same, more of what they want. Artists that constantly challenge themselves. That art is about another key component of what is art. Art is about this insatiable curiosity, the spirit of being curious, again, like a child, of always wanting to discover, to learn, to reconfigure, to recast, to rethink. Yeah. So anyway, the art market likes things that are proven to be, that are proven to perform well. The art world is more conservative than the legal profession, the finance profession, the fashion world. The kind of strictures that govern the goings-on of the art world are antiquated, backwards, and archly conservative. Before I professionally got involved in the art world, I had this romantic notion of artists getting fucked up, artists drinking lots of booze, hanging from the chandelier, having these freewheeling parties, that it was this kind of anarchistic free-for-all of a realm of pure self-expression and creativity, unbridled, unrestrained, not controlled, not sewn into any preconceived notion of codes of behavior. And boy, was I wrong. I've dealt art from the shows I've curated, and to make a living, that's a whole other story of economic necessity that sometimes still entails finding unorthodox, with me, rather unprofessional ways of selling art, mine and other people's. The only way I've ever been able to sell art is as a dealer to dealer. I have no patience. I have a few personality issues, which will come across the more we talk, but I don't have patience. I can't sell drugs to a drug addict. I don't want to. My role in life is not to convince someone to buy something unless it's something they want, that they know they want, because then I just have this tremendous guilt and a continuing moral obligation to ensure that someone continues to like something. And if they didn't love it in the first instance and were buying it due to my charm, and which is highly unlikely, but I'm not a salesperson by nature. I have extreme passion for what I like and what I care about, but I can't conjure it up for something, and I can't instill it into someone else. So I found that art dealers have made this leap of faith in their life, that they spend their lives in art like I wanted to do. They're the easiest people to sell to, or going to a professional auction house, because they do all the logistics and they do all the selling. And that, to me, is the best of all possible worlds. And that has enabled me to continue through good times and bad times. I've sold loads of my art over the course of the last 35 years almost. I've sold stuff at galleries. I've sold stuff at auction. And my largest success as an artist was in NFTs. When I found out about NFTs 4 years ago, what immediately drew me to the notion of non-fungible tokens, and I probably taught the first university class on NFTs. I just wrote a book on NFTs, co-authored with a scholar from Cambridge. I couldn't care less about NFTs. I couldn't care less about anything other, like I said initially, my family and art in general. People think that NFTs are art. The NFT is a smart contract. 90% of the time, unless the art is on chain, in which case the art is not in Norway, it's nowhere. It's on a series of parallel, decentralized computers. That's the essence of the blockchain. But 90+% of the time, an NFT is just a contract that points to a file. I created a series of 10,000 NFTs myself, and I have to pay storage fees every single month, or my NFTs will disappear. So if I die and don't make provisions for the storage to be paid on a service called Pinata, you will have a smart contract with a nice blank rectangle in your wallet. I still believe wholeheartedly, even though the market had a tremendous setback down 90%, I went from selling my art for $20,000 at a high, but I've sold 10,000 of one inexpensive series. That adds up quick enough to I was selling the same art I sold for $20,000 for $10 or $50 or $100. And I have to say, I derived the same satisfaction with a sale, selling to another human being that wanted to somehow coexist with my art. The price means nothing. It's this kind of connection that you make with another person that will spend their hard-earned money, and God knows it's as hard to make $10 as $100, and to have someone who wants to make that leap of faith and join forces and have this relationship is an extraordinary thing. Art obviously still would exist in a vacuum as art per se, but it's relationship based, which is extraordinarily significant aspect of the whole dynamic of what art is. So for me, NFTs, technology, all of that stuff, they're all tools. Sometimes if an artist uses a smart contract or the blockchain as the building block for what they're actually creating, then NFTs can be art in and of itself, as could AI. AI is not a threat to artists. It's the same way artists use scissors, only more advanced, not even more advanced. It's just different, but it's just, why not use everything at your fingertips to explore anything that you feel like doing, as long as you're not hurting someone. One great thing about NFTs are they enable artists to have a future stake in the resale of their work. That's great, but I always think it's such a leap of faith or such a commitment to buy someone's artwork. I don't even stake a royalty in my work anymore. I don't even claim a copyright in my creative output. If you want to copy me, go to it. I showed my first digital animation in 1993. I made my first computer printed work in 1994. There's an artist who just died in the past couple of months, Vera Molnar. She was 99. She, like Herbert Franke and Gottfried Jaeger and various other artists, employed computers in the creation of artworks in the 50s. Artists are opportunistic animals. Artists grab everything and anything they can, whether it's owned by someone else, espoused by another artist, in the ether. You can frequently go to artists in various countries and go to different studios and find artists inadvertently making the same works. Anyway, for me, what drew me instantly, I gave a lecture for 1,000 people during COVID at the New School for Social Research, which is on YouTube. And I personally helped to onboard literally thousands of people through my writing and teaching. I'm not trying to brag or anything. But at the time when the market was really stronger than it is today, but it'll come back, I've been told, I've had feedback that it enabled, and NFTs in general, not me, but NFTs enabled millions of creatives to access a market which had been completely shut down to them. What drew me to NFTs was not the smart contract, not where all the advances in computational practice, not the decentralized web of parallel computing, where no one computer or company can be responsible for the preserving of the works. I like the notion of a trust-free contract where you can buy and sell stuff without an intermediary, all digitally. I just like the theoretical notion of the blockchain and what could be the impact for artists like myself. So as soon as I found out about it, I thought this is a way to sell art. It's the first thing in literally like hundreds of years that conveyed a new fundamental system to buy and sell art without relying on the typical gatekeepers. I mean, a gallery today in 2024 is no different from the first commercial galleries a few hundred years ago. There's no difference. It's like a bunch of old white guys sitting around a table in Lloyd's of London Insurance Company in the UK in the 1700s. It's the same sort of two people shaking hands or making a deal to buy an artwork. And I love the idea. It's a revolution that art could be made, art could be sold, acquired, without these very limiting, reductive infrastructure. My whole career has been railing against, like I said, the hypocrisies. So for me, NFTs were a way for artists to wrestle back some of the basic powers of being able to take control of their own destiny. I made an AI model of my writing. There shouldn't be on ChatGPT all of the writing I've ever done for people to try to create an article based on my hard work. But on another level, I couldn't care less. Like, if you want to make a Kenny Schachter article, like, you probably have deeper problems than I do. Now my writing has taken on more of another turn over the course of time, where I've done some investigative reporting work. Recently, I was contacted by a bunch of artists that were wronged by a gallery that never paid them. And I haven't written about this particular issue, but I forced an interview with the owner of the gallery, and he certainly didn't want me to write about him. And I'm helping these people get paid. And that's an extraordinary gift. Not a gift. I mean, it's just it makes me feel very satisfied and joyful to be able to help people, for the simple reason that it just feels good. And it makes me happy, even though I have no expectations for anything else. I don't even want to write about it. I've done it before. I'm busy with other pursuits. But the fact that I can exert some leverage and help other people that are less fortunate, artists are always subjugated. Whether it was musicians in the 50s and 60s getting screwed by record companies, it's still the same with artists, probably worse today for artists. This is something I'm just thinking about sitting here, but like 5 to 10% of commercial intercourse in the art world is regulated by contractual relationships. It's the last bastion of like a multi-billion-dollar business. It's not regulation free, but it's largely, it's completely word of mouth, not even handshake relationships. And the first people to get screwed are the art handlers, the artists, and the people, the ancillary people that work at galleries. And that's something which is really terrible, and something really needs some attention, needs to be paid to that. One of the most significant consistencies throughout my role in the art world has been to help facilitate opportunities for other people, whether it was through my curatorial projects, through my writing, through helping to promote blockchain usage for artists. I've always been really interested in A, learning, B, doing, and C, sharing. And that's probably sums up my life in the shortest nutshell explanation you'll get from me during the course of our relationship. So that's really the essence of what I do. I do what I do. I never think about the lasting impact, if there will be. Sure, it would be nice to be, I'd rather be remembered, I'd rather be affirmed in my life than when I'm dead, because it ain't going to do me much good. And my kids will never really give me that ingredient, because we're all very critical of each other in a very positive fashion, because we all help each other, but we don't take anything for granted. It's almost like my family is a roving art college where we're constantly supporting each other, critiquing. It's a thread that keeps us together. Art, and speaking about art, but also with a very wide open eyes and a critical capacity. My legacy is being lived on a daily basis. I'm not looking in retrospect. I think the artist Ed Ruscha made a painting. I remember it as, I don't want no retrospective. Maybe it is, I want a retrospective. But I mean, I don't want, my legacy is happy children that are healthy, that I haven't fucked up their lives. My legacy is irrelevant to me. Yeah, I would like to be seen as someone that does something meaningful with their life, but I just want to live my life to the best of my abilities and live a self-fulfilling existence. I mean, I want to make the best of the time I have in a way that I want to just create my own destiny as much as I can in relationship to the cards I've been dealt. I lost one of my kids, so when someone says to me, was that fun or did you have fun? It's like, I'll never have fun for the rest of my life. I'll never be happy. I don't want to be happy. But am I content with, there's a lot of things I feel unfulfilled by. I went sober 5 years ago. I quit drinking and doing drugs, and I don't have many regrets. but that was a lot of lost time. And time, there's nothing but time. I wrote an essay on Poltec for this MIT book called There's Nothing But Time. And you could think of it in terms of time is all there is. There's a lot of it, there's a little of it, there's nothing but it. And time is a construct, a human construct, but life and death aren't. So you're here for an amount of time and you have to fulfill it and utilize it to the best of your ability. For me, imbuing your life with meaning is beyond religion, beyond nationality, beyond anything. People will always tell you what you can't do, shouldn't do, but that's not what it's about. It's about self-fulfillment and finding a way to create your own, parameters. Anyway, so I don't know if anyone will look back on what I've done or what I said, and sure, it would be nice, but I mean, like I said, I want to live my life to the fullest, my Long Island accent will creep back in at any given moment. I just want to do the best I can and be comfortable in my skin, which I'm just learning how to do late in life. I believe that we're very capable of doing positive things for other people. And that, for me, is art. And that, to me, is one of the roles I take very seriously in my life, trying to create opportunities for other people to do what I've been able to do so far.